Hey, what's up, soccer fans? This your boy Musa with another episode of Football STL. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify for more episodes and new updates coming from me, Musa. Let's go, let's go. Uh, Hello, everyone. I'm Musa Sekai here again. We are starting a second episode, and this time we have the pleasure to having Matthew from SC Comets, or I will say Comets SC. And we'll talk a little bit of soccer in general, and also we'll have a quick recap of the LA Galaxy versus St. Louis that happened at City Park. And then from there, we'll just talk soccer in general and get to know a little bit about ourselves. As you may know, Musaki here. Born and raised in France. I've moved to St. Louis in about, we'll say, 20 years or so. Um, Coached my kids in soccer. Played a little bit of club soccer and also academy with PHG and Chelsea in long, long time ago. So we'll just give Matthew, I'll give you a little time to introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Thank you, awesome. Yeah, my name is Matthew Pinchback from Los Angeles, born and raised. Been playing soccer. Obviously, much different landscape here in the States, in Los Angeles than in Paris, as you can imagine. But yeah, I've been
Yes.
involved in the soccer scene and playing since I was a kid. Playing in ASO, which is big youth soccer thing here. Everyone's really familiar with. I played in like one club, but then just became a fan. Galaxy came into the league. MLS started in '96, and Galaxy was one of the original teams. They had a legendary player from the national team, Kobe Jones, one of the few black players around at that time. So that was just huge for me because I had always looked up to him playing as a kid. So it was a no-brainer to kind of follow the team when they came into the league, and yeah, kind of been. And then I really became like a serious fan later in the 2000s, like '05, '06. Became really dedicated, showing up to games all the time, and yeah, that's kind of my journey in a nutshell.
Awesome. Yeah, Kobe Jones was definitely one that you might be surprised that that was also known in France. He kind of reminded us of like the Seedorfs, with the dreads and the smile. So definitely
Oh, that's
a
really
name
cool.
that we're familiar with.
It's really cool to hear that. I didn't, I don't have that perspective, so it's really cool to know that he had that kind of crossover appeal even overseas.
Yes, definitely. And I think now we see him do a lot more of the training videos. How to teach kids how to the step over and the dribbling. So it's definitely interesting and someone that we paid attention to more than you, I guess most people will probably assume.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, he always had that swag, right? Like you said, the hair, the look, the way he played with that confidence. It was really appealing. There weren't a lot of players like that, especially when I was growing up. So yeah, very very cool stuff.
Awesome, perfect. Yeah. So I guess a quick history. So I see that you have the Comets at sea. So can you tell us a little bit more about the that supporter group and also I guess the purpose of that group?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot. And yeah, so as I mentioned, I've been a Galaxy fan, since they started, and then
Okay.
really in the mid 2000s started becoming like a really type of fan that shows up to games, and it sort of reaches that point. I think for every fan, it's different. Especially for American fans that didn't always have club soccer to go to, but after a certain point, just going to games, it becomes like an obsession where you're always want to be at games, and it just kind of clicks. And like somewhere in like '07, '08, which is funny because we were terrible then, but it's like at some point like it just clicks, and just showing up to games and being there with your with other supporters and that. Even if you're not good, like it just becomes the habit, and so I really got swept up in it around that time. I sit with some of the supporters groups. There's some great community groups in Galaxy have a great community in general. They have a group that's been there since '96, the Galaxians. They have the Riot Squad. They have Angel City. They have some newer groups like the Outlaws. And I've always felt welcome in those groups, and I've spent time with each of them in one capacity or another. But there's always kind of been a void in that there hasn't been a group kind of specifically for uh, you know black supporters of the Galaxy.
Right.
You know, there's a pretty big black community, obviously here in Los Angeles. There's a big soccer community here too, and just as someone that grew up playing the game, and now that has my daughters getting into the game and that.
Right.
Just looking for ways to connect with other black folks that are playing for pickup games for soccer, bringing them into the Galaxy and that. Just kind of creating a space for it there. So that's kind of how it started, and it started really as like an online thing mostly,
Right.
like just let's kind of get together online and I'll kind of share news about the Galaxy and content. And then people started kind of reaching out like, oh, where do you guys sit? Like, are you guys doing a tailgate and stuff? So it was kind of funny because I'm a pretty shy dude, honestly. So when people were like, "Oh, well, let's meet up, let's go do stuff," it was kind of like I had to kind of step out of my comfort zone and say, "Okay, there's people that really want to be part of this as something bigger than just like a place to hang out online or a place to get news about like black players and stuff." So I really started to think like, well, let's see how far this can go. And so we've been doing like some tailgates and things like that, some viewing parties, get some interest. One place I really want to pivot is doing kind of youth kick arounds. So we've done that at the
Okay.
stadium. I want to do some outside the stadium again, so people can bring their kids. And play with other black kids. There aren't a lot of if you go to the parks, as you can see, there aren't a ton of other black kids still today kicking the ball around, which was my experience, as a kid, and that can be kind of discouraging. So just having creating a space where people can come out and play and see other black kids kicking the ball around too. So it's all of that stuff. We're still reaching out to the community and building on it, and I'm letting the community really kind of steer where they want to go at this point, and some of the folks that have sparked an interest and seeing where they want to go. And again, we want to do more producing content and all that stuff. So it's all growing and it's all interesting right now. It's all fun.
Yeah. It's a funny fact that I'm also sort of a shy person. But when it comes to soccer, that's where people are a little bit surprised because when I'm actually playing or coaching, I'm extremely vocal. But it's like a flip when you get out of that comfort zone. That's when the shyness come in too. And that's also how I started all of this content. For mine, it kind of started with some of the GIF because I'm kind of known to use technology, so those were kind of tools that I had available. So those GIF kind of open, I guess, a little bit of me being out there. And
Sure.
then after that, the supporter sites of St. Louis. I don't know if you've seen, but very supportive. Even though there's not really like a black, I guess, supporting group at the moment, but they did have like the Juneteenth celebration at City Park. They had a Juneteenth flag, and we do have a few. We have a South African player, Ghanaian
Oh, right.
player.
Yeah.
So there's still that connection there. So that's why you guys' supporting group kind of also came up, especially I think the Ghana supporting. Um,
Right.
I guess you have that
Yeah.
session on there. So that was kind of interesting to me to see that a team had so many African players, and also that they were celebrated um, to that extent. So it was kind of quite interesting and welcoming to see. So I think that's pretty much how we first connected when I happened to see. I don't even remember how it came about, but it popped up in my feed maybe because of the LA Galaxy playing St. Louis. Maybe that's
Could
where
be.
some of
Yeah.
the connection happened. So it's definitely good to know that there's either was it African or Black supporting group across the MLS in general. So it's definitely nice to be able to connect with all of you guys. You know, we might not be too friendly, we'll say, when our two teams are
Right.
playing together, but after
Right.
that, it's all for the love of soccer, right? So it's things changes
Absolutely.
definitely after that. So it's
Absolutely.
funny that you brought up the shy part and then getting out of the comfort zone. Me being on screen now, let's just say that it takes extra work for me to go from there. So it's soccer has these ways. It sounds like.
It definitely does, and I'm glad you're doing it. And that was the cool thing for me is I've been a part of like the community, especially the online community. I know a lot of the figures in like Galaxy Soccer and some of the folks that even some from the other teams and some of the supporters groups. So especially some of the other Black supporters groups or just the Black content makers. It's been cool. A lot of them have reached out and been really supportive. So I've tried to reciprocate that, and reach out. And of course, if we were closer to the table, it might be a different story, right? but like you
If
said,
maybe if I was at LA, FC,
yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah. Absolutely. But yeah, it's great. It's great that the community of creators that there are, of all races, but
Yes.
specifically for, Black and African supporters, really try to reach out to those groups and reciprocate. And they've been really supportive because it's still a very small community. Like the
Oh,
soccer in the
yes.
US community is still very kind of small and tight knit. And then when you think about like some of the groups like the Black supporters groups or like Black Diamonds and Black Herons out in Inter Miami and stuff. You're talking about even a
Right.
smaller group. So it's great that we can support each other and kind of help out and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was definitely the goal of mine. Because I do have a lot of this, we'll say, Black supporter group with the teams that I support outside of MLS. There's a plethora of those. We're all connected, but I think you might be the first one, I believe. From I think there's also a Chicago group that we've had a few
Yeah,
conversation with. Um, there was maybe a little bit more banter since we're so close to each other.
that's
So
true.
we
Right?
so we do speak quite often about soccer, but it's not as I guess not much communication until those two teams play together.
Sure, of course.
Excellent. Yeah, and so other than so out of the LA Galaxy, so knowing that it's probably one of the founding team out of so how is your feeling about the current situation with LA Galaxy? They've had quite a few, we'll say, interesting um, events the past few months.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's been a tough couple of years. Like someone was kind of someone was comparing it to like Man United kind of thing, and how they had this dynasty, right? And then
Right.
they've kind of really fallen on difficult times, and it's very comparable in that way. Like if you came into the league 5 years ago, you would be like, well, who are the Galaxy? They haven't
Right.
they've missed the playoffs a bunch of times, and they have the stars, but they haven't been at least on the field up to that caliber. And we've still been
Right.
blessed to have like some pretty great signings like Zlatan and Chicharito, some guys who have some global recognition. Douglas Costa, even though
Right.
he's kind of fallen on some difficult form, but he's finding his form again in that. So, but yeah, and that was part of what inspired me too. Is the supporters got together and they had this boycott. They organized this boycott. They said they committed to it like last year, and they played it out through the season. And they really stuck to it, and it was
Yes.
pretty like an unprecedented thing. And I remember, um, just as and I'm a season ticket holder, and that, and just kind of as a fan that's not in a supporters group, I was like, this is
Right.
really impressive, and none of us knew where it
Yes.
would go. Like, we didn't know it was gonna work at all,
Mhm.
but we were all kind of committed to doing it, and so the fact that it kind of came about, and then and the president Chris Klein. He was instantly removed. That's what they were
Right.
protesting for. Is like we're not coming back to this. There's real change in the front office and that because we've been through several coaches. We've had a couple of GMs come through since like 2015, 2016, since this decline started. And the one constant has been, the Chris Klein, who's been
Klein. Right.
the president. Yeah. And so they were like, yeah, we want this guy out. We're not coming back to games. We're not doing the drums. We're not doing any of that stuff. And yeah, if you saw any of those games, the guys were playing and like
It was bad.
really,
Yes.
yeah, it was it was dreadful conditions. And it worked. I think it was like after the Charlotte match, they had a press conference and announced that Klein was going to be stepping down, and that kind of surprised everyone in a way. But it really reinvigorated the team. As you can imagine, a team that's
Oh
used
yeah.
to winning, fans that are used to winning, used to kind of being always in the conversations at least for being a top team. So it was really kind of born out of that I did the Comets SC thing because
Hmm.
people were like, well, let's go back to games. People were excited to go back. Obviously, people want to support the team. All the time.
Yeah.
People want to go to
Definitely.
games, even when we're bad. People want to go up. It's part of the culture. And it was kind of born out of that. And like you were saying, it was right around Juneteenth. I think that was our first game back actually, for the
Nice.
Juneteenth celebration. And I said, well, yeah, I want to kind of do something around that and bring some folks in and that. And so it was kind of born out of that euphoria about like, okay, let's get back to the games and what's that going to look like. And I thought, well, I've kind of been doing this thing online, but kind of let's take it to the games and see what kind of
Yep.
showing we can get. So it was kind of a neat watching that happen. So There's a lot of hope now because like the signings we're making are a lot better. Not everyone loves Greg Vanny yet, so there's still there's still some impatience with him. But I would say generally that people are a lot more optimistic, especially going into next season, knowing that we have all these contracts kind of rolling off. We could have a
Mhm.
really big off season in the winter, and we can be primed to make some moves next year. So I think there's a lot of optimism, going forward.
Yeah, they definitely saw the improvement, especially since the Kate or St. Louis game. Even though I was a little sad that Chicharito was not available to play. That
Yeah.
was one player that I was actually looking forward to. And definitely Ricky Pooch, I was kind of surprised on his way of playing. I guess before the St. Louis, it looks like he was definitely struggling. But we'll say the past three games, it looks like we have starting to get back to the Barcelona Ricky Push that I guess we watched before he moved. So not sure we like it too much in St. Louis now that he's doing better and now we're
Right.
visiting him at home. But um, it's it's definitely nice to see at least those couple of names to be back. So it makes maybe the game that we'll win a little bit more endurable.
Right.
But yes, I have to throw a little bit of those banter
Hey,
in.
I feel you. It's only fair.
Yeah, it definitely have to give you guys full credits for the supporting fan that were there, the bad and the ugly, and still went to the games. Um, I don't know if you see some of my posts. I've been a little critical of even if your team is bad, you still have to show up and support them because it it's still your team no matter what the product is. And
That's
sometimes
true.
you still have to show to show the front office that they still have to deliver a product. So I definitely always give props to those that go to games even when it's not the prettiest. So it's definitely one that I put up high. So for the fans at LA, it's definitely a good thing to see.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really cool. Like, I think everyone's been pretty surprised by how good City has been coming into the league. We've seen that sometimes, like when expansion leagues have kind of hit the ground running, and that's great for you guys. I think you saw some of the stuff online about St. Louis being like a soccer city and a soccer capital, and a lot of folks that don't maybe know the older history, and I wasn't
Right.
part of that. Right, I'm just a big soccer nerd, so
Yes.
yeah, I do all the research and
Love
stuff
that.
like that. A lot of people don't know, but yeah, it's cool to see a club thriving there. Again, I wish you weren't in the Western Conference per se, because we don't need any more
Yes.
good teams in the Western Conference. But no, in all honesty, it's good to see teams coming in and succeeding, and seems like um, like you said, you have the support. There's some. It seems like there's some pretty strong supporter groups there, and
Yes.
it's cool that there's another team that's in there and it's viable and good. So that's always awesome.
Yeah, I was quite surprised. I guess on the supporting side of things. And I always tell people, even though I might go for St. Louis all the time, with their history and kind of back to back, but it's still me trying to kind of learn a lot of their history. It's a lot deeper than I've expected, even though I lived here for 15 plus years. And like those soccer capital, it's been quite interesting to hear, once we'll say someone that's a little bit more famous, we'll call it, like tactical manager just asking, who's really the capital of soccer, and then he's starting to hear all of the other I guess fans making some of those statements, even though they may have never heard of the history behind it. Um, Especially the whole world beating England is that's one of those big ones, and um, you'd be quite surprised on the level of soccer in St. Louis alone and all the club teams. Um, if you were to just drive in St. Louis in more of the counties where there's actually grass or turf, you'll probably see hundreds of thousands of people in every single fields playing soccer all weekend longs. Um, like
Oh, that's
myself
awesome.
today, we've had 5 games alone for 3 of our kids. but you
Oh,
see
that's
a
great.
whole bunch of states and national tournaments coming here to play. So I think it there. I think some of the discussion of them calling themselves, or we call ourselves, capital, is just that um, almost everything is surrounded by St. Louis soccer first here. I'll probably say 3 out of 5 kids play soccer in St. Louis.
That's
So
awesome.
it's
You know,
it was kind of refreshing to, especially someone that grew up in Europe. I'm seeing a lot of those kids playing in St. Louis. It's not something necessarily that we see most. So what would you say around, I guess, LA, because we know there's a big immigrant population. How would you say, the soccer scheme is there? Is it um, a big range of kids playing soccer, or is it more of divided based on the region of?
yeah, it's kind of interesting, and and that's one of the things that I wanted to, when I the whole idea of Comets SC was kind of
Mhm.
bought into this. But yeah, like as you can imagine, obviously there's a very large Mexican community, Mexican American
Right.
community here, but then also there's a lot of Central American communities here as well. There's a big El Salvadorian community, and like one of the Galaxy legends is Mauricio Cienfuegos, who's like El Salvadorian legend. So there's a big El Salvadorian support for the Galaxy historically, and it's funny because I grew up playing with like El Salvadorian Mexicans, other
Okay.
Central Americans and that, and so you have those communities and they have their own leagues.
Right.
As well, so like Donovan, Landon Donovan, who's another Galaxy
Yep.
legend and U.S. legend, he talks about growing up playing in like the Mexican leagues and stuff like that, which were
Right.
really informal kind of leagues around the city and that. But back in the '90s, at the same time, there were all kinds of like semi-pro leagues.
Right.
There was a huge thing. ASO started in Southern California, not very far
Yep.
from where the Galaxy are. UCLA was a big hub for soccer and stuff. So you have really unique communities. You have kind of obviously the kind of Latino communities. You have kind of more European communities. You kind of have these grassroots kind of very Californian communities. Like I felt like in the '80s and '90s, soccer was kind of like surfing or kind of
Okay.
like karate.
Nice.
And they were just really they were almost like it was kind of like part of SoCal. Like this, like you're here, you play soccer and you rollerblade. It was almost like part of the culture here. And then you even have other unique communities like the Vietnamese community. I've
Yep.
been to. I used to play pickup game with some Vietnamese folks and stuff. And one of the things that I want to connect to and build is like because when you look at certain players, you can look at certain players like, oh, that guy's he's from Argentina. I can tell by his footwork and stuff like that.
Right.
Oh, this guy's Brazilian, and it's that same way with Black and African players too. And it's kind of just building that community and saying, so when you're a young Black kid and you go to the park, you can say, okay, this is my style. I can
Right.
because we're all very familiar with like the Mexican style of play or the
Yep.
other style. So that was kind of the genesis of that. And then something I really want to do is connect to some of the like African immigrant populations here because, again, soccer is very new to us,
Yeah.
fairly new, but
Yes.
obviously, for a lot of our African friends, a lot of guys have been been following it for years, and there's a deep understanding of the culture, and there's like every culture has their own names for certain things and like different
Oh yeah.
positions or different moves and all of that stuff, right? It varies from culture to culture, so it'd be cool to really tap into that as well. But yeah, so it's a really diverse. I think from the outside, it's easy to say like, oh, it's a very kind of Mexican or Latin American
Right.
culture, and that's definitely a huge influence. But there is kind of a uniquely Californian aspect to it. There's a
Mhm.
very big diversity. There's even like a big Japanese. I used to play with these Japanese guys that would play
Right.
every once in a while. They had their own like a pickup community, so it's really neat. You have a really diverse community here, which is really cool. It wasn't really. I always felt like really privileged. It wasn't until I left LA because I thought like everyone plays soccer. Like at school, we played soccer. Like I grew up playing soccer. When people would say like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I
So
can
it's
never find pickup games," I would be like, "What are you talking about? Like there's pickup games, you can go anywhere." But yeah, it wasn't really until I left LA that I was like, "Wow, it really is different in other places."
nice. Yeah, and that's also one of those big things that and we almost did that growing up playing soccer too. Is some of the you know playing with multiple we'll say communities. It definitely helps you your skills knowing how to play against a certain person or others because um definitely if you in your comfort zone, there's only one certain way to play. But once you get, start moving to another country, that's where you kind of find your issues. Just like the pros, when they go from Germany to France or France to England, there's always that difference of skills. We'll just say Pulisic, for example. He went to Germany. He excelled because they were more technical and less physical. Went to England, realized that it is quite physical team, and
Yes, that's
there's
right.
the
Yeah.
injuries start showing up quite often from there. And then now he's back to in Italy where it's more skills, and now he's starting to thrive again because it's more of his skill of you know dropping, dribbling, centering the ball, and now he's scoring goals every games, which guess is refreshing to him, especially that I was a fan of his during his Chelsea days. But not playing does not help. Um,
Right.
you
You need
being,
minutes no matter
the
where you
star.
are, right?
Yes. Awesome. Yeah. So that's definitely one of those nice things to know about. Being able to play with different communities. So what would you say it's maybe one of those struggles for we'll say African American or Black kids to play, in a system that sort of closed in. I do know that in St. Louis we have a lot of club soccer teams where you have to those crazy fees and everything that everyone speak of. Is there any, I guess, type of structure in your area that kind of help you know widen the opportunity?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's funny because it's something I've just kind of been dipping my feet into because I didn't really play, that seriously when I was a kid.
Okay.
I would kind of, I got sponsored to play for like a friends club team kind of thing,
Oh, yeah.
and I didn't really take it much further than that. And now that my daughter's just starting out, and I'm having to like she just turned 5, so she's just really
Okay.
starting ASO. But I'm at that point where I'm meeting other
Perfect age.
parents, and yeah,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. But I'm meeting other parents and talking about like, okay, where to put them, and it's challenging. You don't want to make the wrong decision in that.
Yeah.
So I've heard more from other parents that have like first, kind of like that really early experience that they're getting that experience of like, of how what the challenges are for
Hmm.
all kinds of kids,
Right.
just to try to move up and try to get games and try to um, get developed. So it's a lot of stuff that I hear, and that's another area where I'm hoping our supporters group can help out too. Is just again creating kind of centers of knowledge where you can
Hmm.
connect with other people that know a lot about the game. Again, if you're maybe a Latin American person in LA or something like that, you might be connected. You might be a part of a community where there is that deep knowledge. It might
Right.
come from a father or an uncle or something like that. And if you're a young Black player, you may not have that. You may not have someone in your family that played or coached or knows anything about the game. They've even watched games before. That's how it was for me. When my folks would come to games, they didn't know anything about soccer.
Yeah, I think
My
it's
brother
one
was
of
into
it's I guess it's one of those the whole football, basketball that's more accessible like to African
yeah,
American kids especially, and um you know some of those sports for us is a afterthought.
right.
Soccer, it's pretty much everywhere. I do know we had the baseball field back in France where we grew up. I cannot tell you one time I saw anyone play on there. And
Right.
basketball was Jordan. We know that there's the NBA, but it was not really a Tony Parker until we got older. So and
Sure.
in soccer, it's almost like a um, part of life, we'll call it.
Yeah. And so that's one thing that I want to learn is try to have the group be kind of educational as well. So even if we're so we can get coaches in there, people that have some expertise, especially we can get like former players and things like that. But then just also watching games and talking about games, just really, um, like for me, there was that moment that like clicked, and it's like, okay, like I'm obsessed with this. Like whether we're winning or losing, I'm going to be here, and just to get people onto that journey, because I think that's really what. And I'm not downplaying the importance of systems in a good club and
Right.
youth club, but I think like really getting people over that hump, like the way they are like when I was growing up with basketball, there was like the kid that always had a ball. There was a kid that was always
Yes.
dribbling. He was on the bus dribbling. He's dribbling down the street with the basketball. And it's like having kids do that with soccer balls is kind of where we, need to be, where they just always want to touch. They're always juggling. They're always just touching the ball. So really just trying to create the environment for that. But yeah, like we all kind of heard about a lot of the challenges with, just the costs, the traveling, some of that stuff, and how it can price people out. So I'm still kind of learning a lot of those challenges. Again, I don't deal with it firsthand, but just a lot of the folks when I've reached out in supporters group, they just like mention that. It's the first thing they'll mention. It's like, oh yeah, I'm looking for some opportunities for my kids to get more exposure or get more learning or get more education. Like they're not satisfied maybe with they're paying a lot and they're just like, well, my kids are playing games and they're tired, but they're not maybe building skills and that kind of thing. So that's something that I've kind of heard. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I think it's something that, it's something that we'll work through. I think it's something communities kind of have to figure out, hopefully, and get through. And hopefully if we can advocate too, that's another thing is making your voice heard and hopefully enacting some of that change.
Awesome. So yeah, and I think for one of the documentary I saw, I don't know if you go to Apple Pass. I think there was one where they had I guess we'll see, a documentary about Washington D.C. history of Black
Mm.
soccer in DMV, and also one of the I think I may have forgot the name of the Black college that actually was part of the college championship against St. Louis University. It
Yeah,
looks
I just
like
heard about that actually.
yes, yes. So I think there's I'll probably will send you the message with the documentary, but it was definitely interesting to see how and see I guess the collegial soccer um with the black players and all the championships, because it looks like he had quite a few college uh championship. I wonder if it was Howard, but I could be
Yeah,
mistaken with.
I think it was Howard. Yeah,
Yeah, so I think that's definitely be one of those that showing to some of the kids, that shows that soccer was it's been around for a lot more. It's just it's not commercialized or publicized as much. So I was quite surprised that in Washington D.C. there was that big of a history of soccer, and knowing that DC United was part of it, and then starting to see a lot more. I guess the rappers also being honored
yeah,
too. So that was quite interesting too, because that opens the door for the kids that support that rap. I guess is it Young Gotti? Yeah, yeah. So it's
yeah.
definitely one of those things that says, oh, he owns a soccer team. It's not a basketball team or football. So um it definitely will open the door for yes, some of those kids that
Yeah,
maybe never thought about that. And definitely,
yeah,
I think the other
absolutely.
one was Chad Ozachinko, knowing that he picked, he was choosing between soccer and the NFL, but you know soccer didn't have any money, so he went to football. So it was so it looks like there are some of those stories that has connections to soccer. It's just not enough, I guess, stories put around them, or I guess I'll say, yeah,
Yeah, it's very interesting, and there's a lot of little stories like that, and some of them I know. Again, I'm a big soccer nerd, but some of them I don't. I didn't
yes,
know about the Howard thing. I think I heard about that just coincidentally a couple weeks ago, which is a really cool story. And I guess they inspired like the Kaiser Chiefs in South Africa, which is really
yes,
cool. So, yeah, and I had never heard that, But you always, it seems like I'm always stumbling upon these really interesting. I remember a few years ago, like I remember reading this article and they're saying like, oh, this arena soccer league is closing down, and I'm like, arena. And I had heard about it. I remember hearing about it in the 90s. I'm like, arena soccer, like that's still going on. And yeah, it had been going on for like 20 years. And I'm just
oh
like, that
yes,
we sustained an arena soccer league for like 20 years,
yeah, and I think
Yeah,
we
I think
have
Donovan went
one,
to play
yeah,
there. Yeah.
yeah, and we have one, and I believe Kansas City also have, and I think
Yeah.
that's the same owner. Um, but yeah, and I think I have quite a few of our St. Louis supporters that kind of tried to get me to go to one of their games, which I think in November I'll make the drive to go and watch one of those, because it's a little interesting on
It's
how
interesting
indoor
for sure.
soccer is. Yes. Awesome. So yeah, so those are the fun things. And on that part, so is there anything that you like to share regarding LA Galaxy before we go into more of a um, LA Galaxy versus St. Louis soccer?
Let's see. I don't think I have anything specific. Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay. Awesome. So yes, so now that LA Galaxy is hosting St. Louis City tomorrow. So how are you feeling about, based on the last game that happened and some of your expectations for um this upcoming match?
So it's been pretty interesting for Galaxy fans. So I think like when since Chris Klein got fired, I think we've been like almost unbeaten. I think we've lost like one regular season game. Obviously, we flamed out of Leagues Cup. We didn't do well in that tournament at all. But in regular
Welcome to the
season,
club.
I know, right? I'll take one. I'll take regular season.
Yes.
But yeah, so like in regular season, we've been pretty strong. We keep getting hit with injuries and that. So I think like and I think for me, I tend to be more optimistic than a lot of Galaxy fans.
Okay.
I'll say,
Fair.
but I think that when we're playing well into our potential, I think we can match like any team in the league.
Mhm.
And you kind of saw that when we played like St. Louis the first time around. I don't think
Oh
people
yes.
expected us to get much out of that match, but I think when the team shows up and they play well, they can be a match for anyone. The challenge is, we keep getting hit with injuries, things like that, and that affects your consistency and some of those things. Um, but I think like so there's two Galaxy fans, right? So I think we're really
Okay.
behind the eight ball, and we need like all these points. I think we need like to get at least 5 wins out of our next 12 or something like that. To have a chance at the playoffs, and we're unbeaten since that run. We tied Houston, who's a pretty strong team at home,
Yes.
despite having some injuries in that. Didn't look so convincing doing it, but we eked out a tie,
Hey,
which is not bad.
a tie is a
Uh,
tie.
a tie is a tie. Hey, when you need points,
Yes.
sometimes under the circumstances, you take what you can get. So I'm pretty optimistic about this match. I think like if we play well, I think we can get. I think we can get the win. I think we could get at minimum like a point. Um, Having said that, there's some injuries that are that are concerning, right? And I think more so even in the injuries, I think there's kind of just like a morale thing. Like there's been every time the team seems like it's hitting its stride, something kind of comes and takes the wind out of their sails. And so like in the last match, Caligari, who was our right back, we brought in. We're feeling really good about that signing. He replaced Julian. I can't believe I'm forgetting this guy's name. Our old right back. I want to call him Julian Alvarez, but I know that's a totally different guy. Julian Araujo,
There
who
you go.
we we there's too many Julians in soccer right now. Araujo, who we sent over to Barcelona. I think he's playing for a different team in Spain now. But he was one of
Yeah.
our best players, and we were able to replace him, which felt really good. But then now Caligari is down. And it sounds like it might be season ending as well. So
Ouch.
we've, we've got to kind of fix that spot. And again, kind of defensive consistency has been a challenge. So it's one of those things like as well as we play going forward, you always feel like the Galaxy can give up a goal at like any time, you know. And so having that defensive, having to sub in another defender and still not having the back line consistently is a worrying point for me because it feels like even, no matter how well we play, like we'll get Douglas Costa back, which is great. I think he's been on fire, and I think having him around, we talk about Puig. I think having him prevents people from marking Puig out of the game. I
Okay.
think where he plays in the middle, it's very hard to be effective as like the primary playmaker in that spot because it's crowded. It's a very crowded spot, and so having Costa there on the wing helps prevent people
Kind of
from
spread out.
collapsing on him. Yeah, and you saw that in Houston, right? Like they totally were all over him, and we couldn't really play our possession game and any of that stuff. So having Costa back is huge,
Mhm.
but I'm really worried about about that back line.
All right. Yeah, and I think for us is almost one of those different stories, we'll call it. Just came back from our Kansas City game where pretty much we went and visited them, and we'll say we it almost felt like a home game. If you were to watch the game, you probably will see that St. Louis supporters, you could hear them louder than the KC fans. which
Oh
was
wow,
kind of a different experience. Other than that, we had I think we started well with Sam Adelium went and scored the first goal. So I was starting to, kind of have to feel that we've a record that if we score first, I think almost 95% of our game were won. So I was a little comfortable with it. But it looks like their Polito player that scored twice against St. Louis was actually also injured the first time around. So
that's
it
true.
was one of those quite interesting where they were a different team when he came in. So that was kind of the I'm expecting maybe City to come back and having another point to prove back to with LA. Um, our last game with LA, we'll probably say was a little bit frustrating. We'll call it because we almost called it was maybe a little bit more of what you call flopping, but since we have a team that has high pressure, so there was a lot more foul calls and players wasting a little bit more time. But at the end of the day, you think about you just lost Cicciardo to an injury.
True,
Your
yeah.
president is gone. So if you have a high pressure team, your technique is you know take those fouls as much as you can and go home with a point, which they did. So some of us will say took that almost like an L, but it was. I think there's a sentiment where a lot of us City fans are kind of expecting this is our time to take that the win. Um, but we didn't have too much banter with LA Galaxy fans, so it's more of those you know um, walk up in games that we can go to enjoy, talk to LA fans. Kansas City and Chicago fans is a different story
Right, I can
because we're
imagine.
much closer. But I'm definitely expecting. I did see that Puig is moving forward a little bit more and taking a lot more shots and risks. So I'm hoping our defense, pay a little bit more attention to him on in the middle of the park because it looks like he's dribbling a lot more like his Barcelona days than pre St. Louis, which is of kind of a scary time.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I have not watched him much. Since moving to LA, so I kind of circle back always to his Barcelona days. But it's definitely one of those players that we have to pay attention to because a lap of attention will he'll put the ball in the net quite quickly.
yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah,
He,
go ahead.
yeah, he does everything. So that's good and bad because you can shut him down. You can, and it's funny what you mentioned, kind of about the city style and pressing and that because really the Galaxy's destiny could really depend on what kind of ref we get.
Okay,
Because some
which
of
is
them,
bad. That,
which is bad. Yeah, that's not a good thing for us at all. But yeah, it depends
I
on
think
how
for us as well, we've not had much luck with
that's
referees and high pressure. Um, the calls will be there will be quite
yeah.
a lot of calls will call it.
Yeah, and so it depends a lot on on Puig and what kind of game he can have, and if he can get fouled out of the game, and that, and not even fouled out necessarily, but just kind of like LAFC did that to us in the playoffs. They really got under his skin, and he's a young guy, right? He's real
Yep.
hot headed, so they got under his skin. They just did enough to him to just throw him off his game, and luckily, I mean, he's matured a lot since then, but that's
Yeah.
still a part of his game. And,
And I
and
love
and
it.
yeah, there's no shortage of MLS defenders that can play that game with you. So that's going to be a big piece of it too. And unfortunately, we don't like none of our strikers are really going. So we've
Okay.
relied a lot on those goals from midfield. Tyler Boyd's another guy that's scoring, but we
Yep.
haven't really gotten our strikers going. So that's concerning too. Because if Puig doesn't have a great game or come up with a bullet from midfield, then
Yeah.
you know it's tricky. You don't have
So
that bread and butter like get the ball in front of the striker and he's going to tap it in inside the box. We don't have that dimension to our game right now.
it's almost depending on how Ricky Puig wakes up in the morning and go to the park. It's okay.
Yeah, a little bit. Luckily, he's been very consistent going
Yes.
forward, and I think having Costa back will help. But yeah, right now it's a lot of it is dependent on him.
Awesome. Yeah. So I guess maybe not put you on spot. Do you have a prediction on how this game will go?
That's a good question. Oh man, boy, I think I think if we, I can't imagine us like keeping you guys off the score sheet just because I said I think with the shifts in defense, and the fact that our defense has been anything but resolute. I'm hoping that the boost from being at home will help us out a little because we'll need it. And I was just looking back because I remember now, like, yeah, we scored at the last minute in that game.
Yes.
I remember. Um, but at the same time, I felt like, when we did go up there, we did a pretty good job of limiting you guys. And I remember,
Yeah.
like, I think it was Gioacchini had that really, like, what do you do with a goal against like that? I remember his goal was really excellent. So I think that's going to be a big key. I think if we can play that possession game, and I think if we can stay smart and limit a few goals, we may need to be good on like set pieces and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I would go for like a 2-1. That would be ideal
Okay.
for me. Puig gets one. Maybe one of our strikers gets one. That'd be great. Jovic is our starting striker. I think it's between him and Sharp, the new guy we run in. But yeah, now would be a great time for one of those guys to put one away, right? So that's my very optimistic prediction. But I can also see like a 2-2 or a 1-1 coming out of it. But I'm gonna go with my heart and
That
say a
you
2-1.
got to, yes.
Yeah,
And I think for me, it probably on two sections. I'm knowing or seeing how the MLS goes these days. Um, I guess as the fan, I was kind of looking at a 2-1 win St. Louis. Just especially, wanting to have to prove from our last loss to KC. But knowing or seeing how the MLS is structured and pretty much every road games are difficult.
they're very
I'm
tough.
almost seeing like a 1-1 tie will definitely not upset me at all. Especially on the road and having three games in almost 8 days or so. Um,
Good point.
I'll definitely take that 1-1. But as the fan, you want to be, like you say, optimistic. So definitely 2-1 has been my go-to for almost the past 3 or 4 games. So
Not a bad scoreline, right?
yes, we pretty much need a point, and then after that, depend on LA Galaxy and Seattle, to pretty much to lose a few more points. So hopefully LA that's playing, I believe, Portland. Hopefully Portland will do us a favor and take all 3 points, or maybe just give them one. You know.
There you go. Well, I'll definitely side with you on that one because I think we need Portland to win, or we need Portland to lose. But I can't root for LAFC, as you know. So
No, I wouldn't be asking you that ever.
absolutely.
Yes. And I think that was the same thing for us in, even though Miami is not so far from us, it's very far from us. We were actually rooting for Miami to beat, was it LAFC? Yes. Their last game. So that
Oh
three
right, yeah.
zero was welcomed.
I didn't complain either, for sure.
Yes. Oh, and by the way, so speaking of I guess Miami, knowing that now we have Messi in the conversation, um, I have a almost a different view of Messi and all of the parade that's happening. Could you
Yeah.
tell us maybe a little bit of on your perspective, how you feel about the whole Messi and I guess the little caveat on the side, um, are you loving all of that conversation even when he's not playing?
Yeah, it's interesting for a couple of reasons, and I know obviously being from France, you can't be too much of a too thrilled with
Spe-
Messi. That's my
yeah,
that's
that's
my second national team too, so it was tough for me.
yeah. It will take probably another. It will pretty much take till the next World Cup for me to
Yeah,
take that off.
yeah, I could feel you. I'm an adopted French fan, and it's tough for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting in two ways. So for me, as like a Galaxy fan, it's interesting because we're kind of used to being kind of the the golden children of the league, and having all
Yep.
the eyes on us, whether it was Beckham, whether it was Zlatan and stuff. So there's a part of me that's kind of resents it just because they're not talking about the Galaxy,
I
right?
never thought of that point, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So that's a big part of it. And then just like every other MLS fan, like, when it's not your team, you don't want to hear about another team. They're not in our conference, thankfully, but like you
Right.
don't want to hear about another team winning and that. And so I'm probably as annoyed by it as any other fan. I do like, I mean, I can appreciate Messi, obviously, and his skill and what he
Yes.
brings and all of that stuff, and getting to see getting to see him play in MLS is cool. I think that's amazing for the league that we're able
Right.
to have. And again, it goes back to like this great tradition we've had. We had Pelé, back in the NASL days and all that stuff. And so to have him come and play here is amazing from that standpoint.
Right.
And I hope that just like when Beckham was here, I hope it causes the league to mature in a lot of ways, both like how we do roster rules and maybe if we loosen up the roster restrictions a little bit, how we cover the league, the media, and all that stuff. So I think all of that stuff is great. But yeah, like most fans, I get annoyed whenever I see, oh, we got to watch this Messi free kick like 18 times. It shows up in my feed or whatever the case may be. And the people are showing up to stadiums just supporting Messi and forgetting about their own teams and that. Yeah, that stuff annoys me like anybody else. And plus the added layer of being a Galaxy fan, I'm just like, yeah, I just,
What about
so
us?
yeah, exactly. It's like even when we're bad, I want them to be talking about us, even if they're just talking about how bad we are. kind of
Yep.
thing, you know?
Fair.
So it's one of those. But so yeah, like a lot of people, I'm sure I have dual minds about it. Um, but how about you? What
Yeah.
are
So
your
look.
what are your thoughts as well?
Oh, I guess so. I did watch Messi quite a lot growing up. So I think what we've been used to, especially with Messi, is Messi is in town, so we do expect every media, everything around that 1 week or two, fair to be happening. But once he move on to another team that he's playing against, we're typically used to it's been shut down. If he makes one of those magical moves like he always does, then it will be kind of be brought up, but it's not you know every coverage,
Right.
and it's not splashed everywhere that he did this, or that even though his team is in last place, and that there's a countdown of how many points he needs to have, who needs to do what, who needs to lose, an entire statistics of the entire league just because of one player. Even though Alba is magical and Busquets is also even
Good point.
better. Um, a lot of the things that I think Messi with Barcelona were able to accomplish, a lot of this had to do with Busquets being in the center mid. Some of
Yeah.
those passes he makes are crazy, but it takes almost a supporting cast to make someone looks so good. And
Yeah.
I can almost tell that if Messi was there by himself and Alba and Busquets was not in Miami, I cannot see it having that much success that they have now.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's a little frustrating again as a as a fan. Like you said, I think the coverage that they're always covering Messi, like no matter what, and it's almost like they want everyone to root for him. Like I'm
Oh,
not
yes.
going to root for Messi. He's on another
Yep.
team, obviously. So that's kind of frustrating in the sense that it's like, yeah, of course we're going to hate him when he shows up to play against us.
Oh, yeah, you have to.
So that aspect is a little annoying. Is that it's almost marketed in a way like, oh, he's all of we're all rooting for him to make the playoffs. I'm like, no, no,
No,
no, we're not.
that's not how it
Uh,
works.
right. Uh, so yeah, I totally feel you on that. And you're right. I feel like allowing all three of those guys to go to one team is kind of tough. Like it would be nice
Yeah.
if they spread it around a little bit, just because, like you said, it's one thing to have one great player come in, but to have three world class players that can play anywhere still, like you said, that makes it a challenge.
Oh,
I'm never
they
one of
were.
those people to complain, but it's
Oh, they definitely did it the right way, where they put it. a center mid that's excellent, and then they put another forward ish in Messi up, and they've played together for almost what 10 plus years, so they literally know everything about each other. Um, I wouldn't be surprised. Apparently, Griezmann is thinking about
Yeah,
next year or so. Um, I will probably. It's almost a guarantee that the DP label will probably disappear in a year or two, just so that you know, which I can still appreciate. If a
yeah,
team wants to spend it, let it spend it, um, and then they will have to deal with the consequences of it. Um, but knowing that the MLS is more of a private company, I'm wondering how that structure will um, go about. Because
it'll be
clearly,
really
no
interesting.
no team is going to fold now. There's way too much
Right.
money, so the concern of having the league folding, it's impossible. I almost will say, just
Yeah, yeah, it's a
let
good point.
them, and almost let them spend. And it was quite obvious when St. Louis play against Club America. You saw how, I guess, get destroyed pretty much, but one of their players was just bought in for 18 million and another one for 23. If you think about it, their entire team was a team of DPs.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
that's
like,
that's a that's a big difference because if you see unless obviously you splash on the attacking talent, but yeah, that's the difference between in a in a like a Mexican clubs is yeah they'll have like $1 million center back or
yes.
uh, or a $2 million right back or something like that, and we don't spend that. It's not economical in MLS to spend that way, and you can see
Oh,
that
and
would
you
make a big difference.
yeah. And you're generous when you say 2 million. We're talking
Yeah,
10, 12
exactly,
for a defender,
exactly.
and then the whole lineup is 100. You're like, yeah, you better
Exactly.
win.
Absolutely. So yeah, if we could see some changes like that, just to balance out squads a little more, that would be great. It's a step in the right direction.
Also, perfect. So yeah, so it was an awesome conversation. It was definitely good to just reach out, and I'm definitely looking forward to more of these conversations. And other than that, so do you have any you know guess events or anything plans that you have in the coming weeks or months that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for and yeah, thanks again, Lusa, for reaching out and what you're and doing what you're doing. I really enjoy the content that you're sharing and all that stuff. Like I said, there's not a lot of banter between our clubs right now. That may change if we meet in the playoffs or something like that, but we'll see. But yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, for me, yeah, right now you can watch our socials. We're on Twitter, Black Galaxy Fans, and on Instagram, Black Galaxy Fans. You can always reach out to me there, and I'll usually share some of the stuff that we're doing. Right now, the next thing I think I want to do now that ASO started is like do like an ASO kick around. So if you have your kids in ASO, just bring them out to the park. You can meet other Galaxy fans, other Black fans, and that. And I try to be inclusive with everyone. I don't want
Yeah.
to exclude any groups, but I specifically just want folks to know that it is a place for Black folks to come. And so I'm going to do some of those some more of those types of events, away from the stadium and that. 'Cause I know it's not always feasible for them to make to the stadium and everything all the time. But I'm going to be hitting up a few different neighborhoods and doing that. And again, just getting people to come out. So yeah, watch the socials. I'll be sharing more info about that as it happens.
Hey, awesome. Yeah, and feel free to share with me. So I do a lot more of the content for St. Louis, CDSC, but also you probably will see a lot of my content also has to be, you know, less of the aggressive, we'll say. On my part, especially knowing I'm all about the soccer and also understanding how players deal with a lot of the social media that's different. Knowing especially knowing that I've been around some of those players or you know some of the things that may affect them or it's most of the time as a supporter we do have a lot of our we'll call it in our feelings. But there's also, they also got to know that, a lot of the players do take some of those, um, they are watching, that's for sure. But also at the same time is, like anyone else, if you show them support and, show that as long as they play for your team, they're also your players. So that's pretty much the way I do things, and you probably see in social media. Not that much of a ranting. It's more of a, support your team, good, bad, ugly. Um, there's always the next day. So feel free to let me know about any content or any events. I'll always share them, since I'm big on youth and improvement. So feel free to reach out anytime.
Appreciate that. Awesome. Will do.
Yep. Excellent. Yep. So with that, looks like, well, we'll take a little break for myself so I can maybe catch up some breath after 5 or 6 games. But hope you had a good time, and look forward to speaking with you again.
Yeah, yeah, definitely do it again. I think you're a Chelsea fan also, right?
Yes, we won't say too loud these days for now, because we're kind of yes.
Hey, I also support Chelsea, so I know where you're coming from.
Yes, and
So
those you will probably not see me. I'm a different person when we talk Chelsea, especially for the past few years. But yes,
hey,
those that know, yes.
yeah, so we'll have to get down on that at some point too, and commiserate on, on how that's going. But yeah, yeah, thanks again for having me. Thanks again for doing what you do. Again, you're adding to the whole soccer community as well. It's great to see. I'd really dig your content, and yeah, it's great to chat with you and be on.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, so we'll keep in touch definitely because tomorrow we're playing. So let's hope for yes, a fun game, and hopefully one of us go home with W. But a tie wouldn't hurt.
That's right. We'll both be happy, I guess, if that happens.
Yes, excellent. All right, Matthew, thank you for your time, and hope you have a good night.
Thanks, you too. Appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Hey, what's up, soccer fans? This is your boy Musa with another episode of Football STL. Don't forget to subscribe on Spotify for more episodes and new updates coming from me, Musa. Let's go, let's go.